Hello, and welcome back to the Resilient Path. If you found your way here today, perhaps you're walking through one of those seasons when the path ahead feels unclear. When the choices that once seemed obvious now feel impossibly complex. When you look around and wonder how you ended up so far from where you thought you'd be. Now, settle in, take a breath. Let's travel together to a place where the mountains touch the sky, and a weary traveler is about to learn something beautiful about finding their way home. There was once a traveler who had walked many roads. They carried with them a worn leather satchel, sturdy boots that had seen countless miles, and most importantly, a brass compass that had belonged to their grandfather. This compass had never failed them. Through dense forests where the canopy blocked the sun, across wide plains where landmarks seemed impossibly distant, the steady needle had always pointed true north, guiding them safely forward. But on this particular morning, as autumn painted the mountainside in shades of amber and rust, something went wrong. The traveler had been following a narrow path that wound between towering pines, their footsteps soft on the carpet of fallen needles. The air was crisp and clean. Carrying the earthy scent of damp moss and the distant promise of snow, they paused to check their direction, reaching for the familiar weight of the compass in their pocket. But when they opened the brass case, their heart sank. The needle spun wildly, unable to find its bearing. Perhaps it was the iron-rich mountains interfering with the magnetic field. Or perhaps the old compass had simply reached the end of its faithful service. Whatever the cause. For the first time in years of traveling, they were truly lost. The traveler looked around with growing unease. The path they'd been following had somehow become three different paths, branching out like fingers reaching into the wilderness. Each looked equally worn, equally possible. The familiar landmarks they thought they'd been tracking were nowhere to be seen. Even the sun, filtered through the thick canopy above, offered no clear sense of direction. They tried retracing their steps, but somehow even the path behind them seemed different now. The trees looked unfamiliar. The sounds of the forest, the whisper of wind through branches, the distant call of a hawk felt foreign and unsettling. Have you ever stood in a moment like this? When the tools you've always relied on suddenly fail you? When the internal compass you trusted to guide your choices, your career, your relationships, your sense of purpose begins to spin wildly, unable to find true north. As the day wore on, the traveler tried everything they could think of. They attempted to follow the sun, but the clouds had rolled in, turning the sky uniform gray. They looked for moss on the north side of trees, but in this damp climate, moss seemed to grow everywhere. They climbed a small ridge hoping for a view above the tree line, but found only more endless forests stretching in every direction. With each failed attempt, a familiar friend began to whisper in their ear panic. It started small, just a flutter in the chest, but grew with each passing hour. The internal voice grew louder. You should have been more careful. You should have paid better attention. What if you're walking deeper into the wilderness? What if no one finds you? As the afternoon light began to fade, the whispers became a roar. The traveler found themselves walking faster, then jogging, then nearly running between the trees, desperate to find anything that looked familiar. Their breath came in short gasps, not from exertion, but from the rising tide of fear. But running in the forest when you don't know where you're going is like making decisions in life when you're driven by panic. It usually takes you further from where you need to be. The traveler stumbled, catching themselves against the rough bark of an ancient oak. Their hands were shaking. The leather satchel felt heavier with each step. Night was coming, and they were more lost than ever. This is the moment we all know, isn't it? When the ground beneath us seems to give way. When every choice feels wrong, every direction feels like a mistake. When the harder we try to force our way forward, the more tangled everything becomes. And so, as the first stars began to pierce the darkening sky, the traveler did something they hadn't considered all day. They stopped. Not stopped trying, not stopped caring, but stopped running. Stopped forcing. Stopped fighting against the unknown. They found a small clearing beside a mountain stream and simply sat down. The water moved past them with a gentle murmur, and hurried and constant. The stream didn't seem concerned about where it was going. It simply flowed, following the natural curves of the landscape, trusting that the path would reveal itself. As the travelers sat in the growing darkness, their breathing gradually slowed. The panic that had driven them all day began to ebb, like water receding after a flood. And in that stillness, they began to notice things they had missed in their frantic searching. The sound of the water was clearer now, and they realized it was flowing steadily in one direction downhill toward the valley. Mountain streams, they remembered, eventually lead to larger rivers, and rivers lead to civilization. Above them, as their eyes adjusted to the darkness, the stars emerged one by one. And there, reflected perfectly in the still pools of the stream, was the constellation their grandfather had taught them to find, the one that pointed to the North Star. The same star that had guided travelers for centuries, long before compasses were ever invented. The traveler smiled softly in the darkness. The guidance had been there all along. Not in the frantic searching, not in the desperate running from tree to tree, but in the quiet stillness. In the patient attention to what was already present. They spent that night beside the stream, wrapped in their travel cloak, listening to the water's gentle wisdom. And when morning came, they followed the stream downhill, letting it guide them slowly, trustfully, toward the valley below. By midday, the traveler emerged from the forest into a small mountain village, where the stream they had followed joined a larger river. The villagers welcomed them warmly, offering hot tea and directions back to the main road. But something had changed in the traveler during that night beside the stream. They had learned something profound about finding their way not just through the wilderness, but through life itself. They still carried the broken compass, but now they understood it differently. It wasn't their only source of guidance, it had never been. There were other ways to navigate: the flow of water, the position of stars, the wisdom of stillness, the kindness of strangers. The compass had been a wonderful tool, but it was not the source of their ability to find their way home. From that day forward, the traveler moved differently through the world. When faced with difficult decisions, they remembered the lesson of the stream. Sometimes the way forward reveals itself not through force, but through patience, not through panic, but through presence. When the path ahead seemed unclear, they would pause, breathe, and look for the subtle signs that were always there, the people who appeared at just the right moment, the opportunities that flowed naturally from their genuine interests. The quiet voice of intuition that could only be heard when the noise of anxiety was set aside. The traveler learned that being lost wasn't a failure, it was an invitation. An invitation to discover new sources of guidance, new ways of trusting, new depths of resilience they never knew they possessed. And so our traveler's story comes to an end, but perhaps yours is just beginning. Maybe you're sitting here today feeling like your own compass is spinning wildly. Maybe the path that once seemed so clear has branched into confusing choices. Maybe you're wondering how you ended up so far from where you thought you'd be. If so, I want you to know this: being lost is not a permanent condition. It's a temporary geography of the soul, and like all weather, it will pass. The guidance you seek is not missing, it's simply speaking in a language you haven't learned to hear yet. Sometimes it speaks through the flow of circumstances, like water moving naturally downhill. Sometimes it whispers through the reflection of what you value most, like stars mirrored in still water. And sometimes it calls to you through the simple act of stopping, breathing, and trusting that the way will reveal itself when you're ready to see it. Your broken compass, whether it's a lost career, ended relationship, a dream that didn't unfold as expected, is not a sign of your failure. It's an invitation to discover the deeper sources of wisdom that have been with you all along. The stars that guided your ancestors still shine above you. The streams of kindness and opportunity still flow around you. And the quiet voice of your own deep knowing still speaks, waiting patiently for a moment of stillness to be heard. You are not as lost as you think you are. You are simply between destinations, learning to navigate by starlight instead of by compass. And that is not a lesser way of traveling, it's a more beautiful one. Take heart. Trust the flow. Listen to the stillness. You'll find your way home. Thank you for sharing this journey with me today. Until we meet again on the path, be gentle with yourself, and remember, you are more resilient than you know. Be well.